Hello and welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I'll be doing a follow-up to my last video where I looked at a timeline where Inko Midoriya was a low to mid-ranking pro hero. In this one I'll be looking at a timeline where she's one of the biggest and most popular in Japan. About 20 minutes or so ago I finished editing the audio for this and realised that the final video would be far longer than I intended it to be, so I'm going to be splitting it up into two halves, with the second half of it landing next week. If you want the full context as to why I'm presenting the what if in the format that I am, be sure to check out the previous video, as it covers the format and how I'm dealing with the absence of Inko Midoriya's father in far greater detail. I had planned to include it in this section of the video, but again, given just how long I realised all this would end up being, I felt it would end up taking up too much time. But in a nutshell, I'm presenting the video like the way that I am, less as a case of fanfiction and more like a case of alternate history. I'm doing this due to a lack of knowledge on the life of Inko Midoriya, so having such a narrow time frame of which to work off of, and an honest lack of confidence that people actually want what ifs based on My Hero Academia. If however you want more videos based on what ifs on My Hero Academia, let me know in the comment section down below. But just like, favourite, subscribe and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today, it would do them a power of good. Now onto the video. When it came to doing this particular timeline, I used a random number generator to determine how well or not Inko would be as a pro hero, blocking off any numbers that I deemed to be narratively significant. In the other video I was far more conservative with the range that I used for Inko, as she was supposed to be a minor hero in the grand scheme of things. In this video, not at all. She's supposed to be a well-known hero, so with that in mind I used the range from 4 to 25 and I got 6. So in this timeline she's one of the biggest and most popular heroes in Japan and possibly even the wider world, which needless to say changes quite a lot. Given that in this timeline Inko is a high-ranking hero, I'm going to say that she either attended UA or Shiketsu High School, as they are both regarded as two of the best in Japan, with Shiketsu being the best school in the West and UA being the best in the East. Seeing as we don't really know much about Inko's history and where in Japan she's originally from, for the sake of the narrative I'm going to say that she still ended up going to UA, as otherwise we may end up with a timeline where Izuku went to Shiketsu instead, and that itself is practically a whole other video in its own right. Being such a high-ranking hero at the start of the events in the main series leads me to two conclusions. One, that her quirk is far more powerful in this timeline, or at the very least she got a better handle in using it, possibly to the point of near mastery to it, and two, she's a very versatile and competent hero. It is plain to see from the top 10 in canon that they are a bunch of heroes that, whilst they are able to work in small groups, are powerhouses in their own right, which means that not only are they powerful, but they also know how to get the job done, which itself means that Inko in this timeline not only is powerful, but also has a keen understanding of the nuances of hero work and is able to cover a far greater deal of operations compared to other heroes. Her time at UA would have been spent ensuring that she had a wide diversity of skills so she could achieve that, being able to work both in combat and rescue operations. I imagine that she would have been a very dedicated student and would have been skilled in practical classes, as Inko Midoriya would have been had the main thrust of the series been more about the academia and the slice of life stuff, more so than the stuff that it ended up turning into. Inko Midoriya likely would have ended up finishing in the top % of grades within her class, building up a great relationship with the other agencies and heroes that exist within this timeline, and carving out a persona that would help her reach the top of the charts. Providing that her personality hasn't really changed all much in this timeline, her caring personality and her tenacious spirit will make her one of the most popular heroes in the districts and the areas that she patrols, and later nationally. She'll be able to take the wholesome, friendly neighbourhood superhero persona to the national stage, becoming a hero who, whilst a great hero in their own right, will still be your typical girl next door, the everyman, or every woman in this case, the local kid done good, which would make her an inspiring hero to be around, as she would be a person that wouldn't have the usual spin and ego that certain other heroes have. What would her name be? Well, that's for you to suggest in the comment section down below. Whilst you're able to like, favourite, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants to do, because YouTube's an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today, it will do them a power of good. Now back to the video. Given that she seems to be around the same age as All Might, she likely would have been around to help deal with the aftermath of All For One's reign, and this is likely where she would have made a name for herself, possibly helping to take down some lingering villains that might still be knocking about, as well as saving some people from some intensely dangerous situations and really pushing her powers to the limit, or at least for the time being. All this would have helped Inko Midoriya to become an incredibly wealthy individual, ensuring a level of financial security that the one in the main canon could only end up dreaming of. Eventually, of course, she would have found the man who would become Izuku's father. As said previously, I'm keeping this rather canon as far as what happened to him is concerned, or more accurately, I'm ensuring that whatever did end up happening to him really didn't matter as far as the wider impact of the story itself was concerned. In the main canon, we're told that he's working abroad, but if the family really is as wealthy as Inko's rank suggests, this likely didn't happen. But seeing as we're still keeping him absent from the story, I'm going to say that he either died or left before Izuku was born, and him working abroad was just a euphemism that she would tell to Izuku Midoriya when he was younger. As he would get older, however, he would learn the truth, whatever that is. But again, whatever the truth really is as to what happened to Izuku Midoriya's father is concerned, it really doesn't end up changing anything. I hate to have to do it like this, but as I explained in the other video, the knock-on effects of him being in the story are so vast that this video would end up stopping being about Inko Midoriya being a hero and being more about Izuku Midoriya's father and what impacts on him being in the story would end up being. So we're just ignoring it. Whatever he is, whatever he's doing, it ultimately doesn't matter. Given that Izuku makes no mention of his father or ends up mentioning ever remembering him, again, I imagine that he was left or died before he was born, which itself leads us to our first major divergent point in the life of Izuku Midoriya. Given that Inko is a single mother and a pro-hero, she likely would have had to take off time from work in order to raise her son, leading to the kind of scenes that we see in the early episodes of this series. However, eventually she would have to return to work. How soon after is hard to say. She really can afford to take time off work given her wealth, but how long is kind of hard to say, because the longer she spends away from work, the more her rank would start to fall, and if she left it too long, her career might fail to recover properly if she ends up returning to work at all. So I'm going to say that she took time off work at least until Izuku was old enough to go to nursery, with members of Inko's family or Izuku Midoriya's family helping to care for him whilst she was too busy, you know, picking him up from school and babysitting him, that kind of a deal, which itself leads to a far stronger connection with them and a greater presence for them in the wider story. Or failing this role would end up falling to a family friend or neighbour, or even a nanny, which would end up coming into the fold depending on how pressed for help she really was. I can't see her being totally removed from hero work during this time away, however. I can still see her doing some light hero stuff along the way to help keep her rank ticking over, doing some crowd control work, going over evidence, consultation work, admin work, with the occasional interview on television about her motherhood and balancing that with being a pro-hero now and again. Hell, she might even get her own show for a brief period of time, discussing what it's like being a single mother and a pro-hero, both of which could result in Izuku being far better known within the media at a far earlier age. Eventually, she'd move back into serious hero work again as Izuku gets older, with family, friends, or the nanny caring for him while she's out. It would be around this time period that Inko would consider starting her own hero agency, if she hadn't already done so, and honestly, this might be the best time period for her to do so, given her time away from the front line would actually give her the time to actually get the ball rolling on that, and it would, at the very least, give her a plan B if she cannot or chooses not to enter into the work of pro-hero work full time. Of course, the existence of an extra hero agency itself changes the arithmetic of who is a hero in this timeline, as people working for her might get a level of exposure they may never have got in the main series, which itself could inspire other people to become a hero who might not have done so otherwise. This could change who gets into A, it could mean there's just more heroes around in general, or could even stop some people becoming villains if they have a new character with which to aspire to be like. But much like they do with Izuku's father, we're going to treat this in canon and say that whatever changes came as a result of this, it doesn't matter. And I don't want to think about it too hard, because all the sheer number of possibilities with all of that would just make my head explode trying to comprehend them all. Izuku would be raised in a far wealthier household than in the main timeline. Whilst this does run the risk of him potentially growing up to become a bit of a spoiled brat, I'm going to say that that isn't going to be the case, and that Inko raises him right to avoid that. The wealth that his family now has will open a lot of doors for him and give him a quality of education that he never had in the main series, even if this could result in one door in particular being slammed shut rather definitively for him, but more on that later. Knowing that his mother was a pro-hero will be incredibly inspiring for the young Izuku Midoriya, given her heroic past and what a great mother she is. Izuku, as far as he is concerned, would see his mother as being the coolest mum in the world. Will this impact upon his admiration for All Might? Yes, he likely would respect her more so than him, which, whilst not something that could result in a bad end for this scenario, it does mean there's a little bit less of a connection between Izuku and All Might should they eventually meet later on. But then with that said, we are still talking about All Might here. He is the #1 hero and everyone loves him, so even if this relationship isn't quite as good in the main timeline, it's so nominal it really doesn't matter. The revelation that Izuku doesn't have a quirk would hit far harder here than in the main timeline, and even harder than in the other timeline that I've already done on this subject matter, as not only would it be seen as a cruel twist of fate that the son of a pro-hero was born quirkless, but Izuku would have grown up in the media spotlight, and not only that, would also have grown up within the world of pro-heroes. He likely would have met many pro-heroes growing up. Hell, he might have met Shoto and his family years in advance and already built up a relationship and friendship with them. And knowing that he would always be different and he would never be like them would hurt a lot. And the truth that Izuku has no quirk would be quote-unquote common knowledge, or at least for the week or so that it becomes known in the press or the gossip columns if he ever does so, which itself may make any potential gain of a quirk later on far more problematic, especially if he doesn't gain one until around the age that he does in the main canon. Furthermore, if Inko is desperate to find a way to ensure Izuku can become a hero, she might resort to some rather drastic action, which brings us to our first bad end of the video. If Inko really was at her wit's end, if things were really getting on top of her, if she was really so desperate for a solution, and if word got out that Izuku doesn't have a quirk and that she was looking for a solution, she might get approached by someone who is connected to All For One. Which, if she's feeling really desperate and feels she has no other option, could result in her allowing All For One to give Izuku a quirk in exchange for helping All For One later on. Izuku's memory might well be wiped to remove any knowledge of this happening, so that he could have the joyous discovery of discovering that he really does have a quirk after all, and he can finally become a pro-hero just like his mum and just like All Might. Even if this ends up coming at a cost that Inko might not realise just how grave it is until it's far too late. This would essentially result in Izuku acting as a sleeper agent for All For One, acting as a spy for him knowingly or not, or acting almost like the character the Manchurian Candidate, with him not really being aware what he's doing until it's happened. And if Izuku gets one for all, this could end up resulting into one hell of a game over, as at that point it would be far easier for All For One to get it at that point, potentially dooming this world to his rule, providing of course there isn't some other power in the world that could stand against him, or providing that Izuku didn't rebel against his control and try to fight back. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't feel that Inko would ultimately end up doing this, as whilst it would make for an honestly rather interesting story, I can't really see it happening in this particular timeline, as even if she isn't quite as old as All Might, she still likely would have cut her teeth during the general aftermath of All For One's reign of terror, and would have a personal reason not to give in to any suggestions of doing all of this. Hell, All For One might consider her to be too much of a risk to even contact, as doing so could result in him and his operations being outed far too early for his liking. Regardless, given that Inko is a pro-hero and a good mother, I'm just going to say that she's going to do everything in her power to ensure that Izuku has the best chance of becoming a hero himself. And so ends this half of the video. I hope you liked it. In next week's video, we'll be seeing how Inko becoming one of the biggest heroes in Japan will impact upon Izuku's chances of getting into UA, if he even gets in at all, and the possible inadvertent creation of a whole new threat to deal with. Ooh. Until next time, my friends, I say, see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!